There's nothing quite like the pain of being cast aside by the ones you sacrificed everything for. Beryl Nanton knew that pain the day his own children threw him out of the house he'd worked 40 years to keep over their heads. At 60, he stood on the porch with 2 trash bags of clothes and his old hound Copper, watching his kids change the locks. They called him a burden, said he was too old, too slow, costing them too much. What they didn't know was their father had $200 million hidden away. Money from a software patent he sold decades ago under someone else's name. Money he never touched or talked about. So, what does a good man do when the family he loved turns their back on him? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, subscribe tomorrow. I've saved something extra special for you. The rain had started just as Stuart changed the last lock. Beryl remembered that detail with particular clarity, how the first drops hit the porch railing, dark spots spreading across the weathered wood like ink stains. His son hadn't even looked up from the hardware, hadn't met his eyes as he tested the new key in the deadbolt. Click, the sound of a door closing on 40 years of fatherhood. This is for your own good, Dad. That was Margot speaking, her real estate agent voice smooth and practiced. She stood beside her Mercedes, arms crossed, already distanced from what they were doing. You can't take care of yourself anymore. The house is falling apart. You're falling apart. Beryl had said nothing. What was there to say? He'd raised these 3 children alone after their mother Lenore walked out. Stuart was 8 then, Margot 6, Garrett barely 4. He'd worked double shifts as a software engineer, made every school play and parent-teacher conference, taught them to ride bikes and balance checkbooks, and treat people with respect, or so he'd thought. "We found a facility," Garrett added, scrolling through his phone without looking up. His youngest, the financial advisor. Clean, affordable. They have activities, meal plans. You'll be with people your own age. I'm 60, not 90, Beryl had said quietly. You're 60 with arthritis and high blood pressure, Stuart counted, corporate attorney voice clipping each word. What happens when you fall? When you have a stroke? We can't keep checking on you. The truth was, they never had checked on him. Stuart's last visit was 8 months ago, a perfunctory 20 minutes between court appearances. Margot called monthly, always rushed, always with an excuse to hang up. Garrett sent texts on holidays. Beryl had watched his children drift away over the years, absorbed into their own lives, their own problems, until he'd become nothing more than an obligation they resented. The house behind them, the ranch style in suburban Portland where they'd grown up, needed work. That was true. The roof leaked in 2 places, the furnace rattled. Paint peeled from the window frames. But Beryl had maintained it as well as he could on his pension. He'd never asked them for help, never been a burden. Until 3 months ago, when his knee gave out and he'd called Stuart because he couldn't drive himself to the emergency room. That single moment of vulnerability had changed everything. Suddenly they were having family meetings without him, making decisions about his future, treating him like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. We're selling the house, Stuart had announced 2 weeks ago, not asking, announcing. The market's good right now. We can get 600,000, maybe more. That'll cover the facility and leave some for emergencies. It's my house, Beryl had said. It's falling apart, Margot snapped, and we're tired of worrying about it. About you. That was when he'd known. This wasn't about his welfare. It was about money. His children, all 3 successful in their own right, all 3 with expensive lifestyles, were looking at their inheritance and seeing it crumble along with the house. They wanted to liquidate now, before age or illness ate away at what they considered theirs. So, here he stood in the rain, with 2 black garbage bags, containing everything they deemed worthy of saving from his life. His clothes, a few photographs, his medications. They'd packed them while he was at a doctor's appointment they'd insisted on. Came home to find his belongings on the porch, and his family inside, dividing up furniture, arguing over who got what. Copper whined beside him. the old blue-tick coonhound sensing something was wrong. Burl reached down, scratched behind his ears. At least they'd let him keep his dog. Small mercies. Where am I supposed to go? He'd asked. We've made arrangements, Stuart said, still not meeting his eyes. There's a room at Meadowbrook Senior Living. They're expecting you tomorrow. Tomorrow. We'll drive you, Margot offered, her version of kindness. No, the word came out harder than Burl intended. No, I'll figure it out myself. Relief washed over their faces. They wanted him gone, wanted this uncomfortable scene over, wanted to get back to their lives without the inconvenient reminder that their father existed, that he'd sacrificed everything for them, that they were repaying love with eviction. Stuart held out an envelope. There's some cash. For the motel tonight. We'll bring your car by Meadowbrook tomorrow, with the rest of your things. Burl took the envelope, without looking inside, picked up his bags. Copper's leash was already attached to his collar. They'd thought of everything. He walked down the porch steps, he'd repaired a dozen times. Down the cracked driveway, he'd sealed every summer. Past the garden where he'd taught Margot about tomatoes, and Garrett about patience, and Stuart about the value of getting your hands dirty. None of them stalked him. None of them hugged him goodbye. They just watched from the porch of his house. Their house now, as he walked into the rain with his dog and his garbage bags, and what remained of his dignity. He'd walked 6 blocks to a bus stop before the shaking started. Not from cold or fear, but from a rage so pure it threatened to consume him. They thought he was weak, thought he was finished, thought he was nothing more than an inconvenient old man whose only value was the equity in a house he'd worked 40 years to pay off. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, could fill volumes. In 1994, Burl Nanton had created something revolutionary. A data compression algorithm so elegant, so efficient, that it would eventually become industry standard. He'd sold the patent through an intermediary for $8 million, deposited the money in accounts under a trust name, and never told a soul. 2 years later, he'd filed a derivative patent for mobile applications. That one sold for $12 million. He'd invested conservatively. Let compound interest work its magic. Never touched the principal. Lived on his engineering salary, raised his kids in modest comfort, and watched his hidden fortune grow into something he'd never imagined. $200 million. Maybe more now. He hadn't checked in months. He'd kept it secret for a reason. Wanted his children to value work, character, independence. Wanted them to make their own way in the world. Earn their own success. Understand that wealth without purpose was meaningless. He'd planned to tell them eventually, when they were mature enough to understand. Sitting in that bus shelter, rain drumming on the plastic roof, Copper's head heavy on his thigh, Burl realized they would never be mature enough. They'd become exactly what he'd feared, entitled, selfish, cruel. And they had no idea who he really was. The memory surfaced then, clear as yesterday. His grandfather, Ezekiel's farmstead in eastern Oregon, 40 acres of high desert, sage and sky. The property had passed to Burl 15 years ago, when Ezekiel died at 94. He'd gone to the funeral, hadn't been back since. Taxes were paid automatically. The house was probably falling apart, but it was his, truly his. A place where nobody knew him, nobody had expectations, nobody could hurt him anymore. Burl stood, bags in hand. "Come on, boy," he said to Copper. "We're going home." Not the home he'd just lost, the one he'd forgotten he had. The drive east took most of the night. Burl bought a used Ford pickup from a lot that stayed open late, paid cash from an account he kept for emergencies, and loaded his garbage bags into the bin. Copper rode shotgun, nose pressed to the window, watching the city lights fade into darkness. Burl drove in silence, no radio, just the hum of tires on asphalt and his own thoughts for company. The anger had settled into something colder, harder. Not rage anymore, but clarity. For years he'd bent his life around his children's needs, their schedules, their approval. He'd made himself small, undemanding, grateful for whatever scraps of attention they offered. And they'd taken his humility for weakness. The highway stretched east through the Columbia River Gorge, then climbed into high country. Around midnight, the landscape transformed. Ponderosa pine gave way to juniper and sage. The air through the cracked window smelled different, drier, cleaner, touched with something ancient. This was the Oregon most people never saw, the empty quarter where towns were 50 miles apart, and the sky went on forever. Dawn broke as he crossed into Morrow County. Pink light spilled across the high desert, turning the sage silver and the distant mountains purple. Copper stirred, stretched, looked at Burl with those wise old eyes that seemed to ask if they were nearly there. Almost, boy, almost. Riverton appeared as the sun cleared the horizon. Population 1,200, the faded sign announced. One main street, false front buildings that hadn't changed since the 50s. A hardware store, a diner, a post office, a grocery with a gas pump out front. The kind of town where everybody knew everybody, where nothing happened fast, where a man could disappear if he wanted to. Burl didn't stop. The farmstead was another 10 miles out, down a county road that turned to gravel, then to dirt. He recognized the turn by the lightning-struck juniper his grandfather had refused to cut down. That tree survived, Ezekiel used to say. Shows respect to leave it standing. The gate was open, hanging crooked on rusted hinges. The dirt track beyond was overgrown with cheatgrass and tumbleweeds. Burl shifted into low gear and crept forward, the truck bouncing over ruts he remembered from childhood summers. Then there it was. The house materialized through the morning haze, like something from a dream. White clapboard, or it had been once. Now the paint was mostly gone, weathered to gray. The porch sagged in the middle. Several windows were cracked. The roof looked intact but probably leaked. Behind it, the old barn leaned 10 degrees off plumb. Red paint faded to rust. Burl killed the engine and sat for a long moment, taking it in. 40 acres of sage and rock and memory. The fields where he'd helped his grandfather harvest hay. The creek probably dry this time of year, where they'd fished for trout. The workshop where Ezekiel had taught him to sharpen a saw blade and true a board edge and measure twice, cut once. A man needs land, his grandfather had told him once. They were sitting on this very porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Burl was maybe 12, spending the summer like he did every year until high school made him too busy. Not to farm necessarily, though that's honest work. But to know he's got a place in the world that's his. Ground under his feet that nobody can take away. Nobody had taken it away. Burl had just forgotten it was here. He climbed out of the truck, knees protesting after the long drive. Copper jumped down and immediately started exploring, nose to the ground, tail wagging. The dog seemed younger here already, like the open space had given him permission to be himself again. The front door was locked, but Burl knew where his grandfather kept the spare key under the third porch board from the left, in a rusted coffee can. The can was still there, the key inside. Some things didn't change. The door stuck, swollen from years of weather, but yielded when Burl put his shoulder into it. Inside, the house smelled of dust and time and absence. Furniture sat under old sheets like ghosts. The kitchen table was bare except for a thick book, his grandfather's journal, left open as if Ezekiel had just stepped out for a moment 15 years ago. Burl walked through the rooms, cataloging damage. The living room was intact, furniture solid if dusty. The kitchen had old appliances, but they might still work. Electricity was on, he'd kept the account active. The bathroom needed new fixtures. 2 bedrooms upstairs, one with a hole in the ceiling where the roof had leaked. Not terrible. Fixable. He found himself back in the kitchen, drawn to the journal. His grandfather's handwriting, firm and clear despite his age. The last entry was dated 3 days before he died. October 14th. Cold snap coming. Checked on the Hutchins family. Floyd's boy is sick again. Took them a chicken and some preserves. Not charity, just neighborly. A man takes care of his community takes care of him. That's how it's supposed to work. Beryl flipped backward through the pages, reading at random. Entry after entry about helping neighbors. Loans given, never collected. Work done, never billed. A pattern of quiet generosity spanning decades. The 3rd of August 1985. Helped the Pritchard family with their barn raising. Maggie made her famous pie. These are good people, salt of the earth. Reminded me why I stayed in Riverton all these years. The 22nd of March, 1967, young Hutchins boy, needed work, hired him for the summer even though I don't need the help. Good kid willing to learn. His family's struggling since the mill closed. The 7th of June, 1943, war's hard on everyone. The Carmody family lost their son in Italy, forgave their store account. Money doesn't matter at a time like this. On and on, year after year. His grandfather had lived with purpose, with generosity, with a clear understanding of what mattered. Not accumulation, but contribution. Not wealth, but worth. Burl's phone buzzed in his pocket, shattering the moment. He pulled it out, saw a string of messages from his children. Stuart, where are you? You're being dramatic. Call me. Margot. Dad, we're trying to help you. Stop being stubborn. We need to talk about the house. Garrett, you can't just disappear. We have POA documents ready. This is happening whether you like it or not. Power of attorney. They actually thought they could declare him incompetent, take control of his assets. The house, his pension, the modest savings account they knew about. They had no idea about the real money. No clue that the father they'd thrown away like garbage had more wealth than they could imagine. Burl turned off the phone, slipped it into a drawer. Whatever they wanted could wait. Forever, maybe. He walked back outside, where Copper was chasing a ground squirrel through the sage. The morning sun was warm now, burning off the last of the chill. The mountains stood sharp against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals, patient and purposeful. This place, this forgotten, neglected place. It felt more like home than anywhere he'd been in years. Bell Nanton stood on his grandfather's porch, his porch now, and made a decision. He wouldn't tell anyone about the money. Not his children, not the town, nobody. He'd live simply, fix this place up with his own hands, prove he didn't need their validation, or their pity, or their grudging care. And if his children came, looking, they'd find a man who was finally living on his own terms. The first week passed in a blur of honest work. Burl woke with the sun, made coffee in his grandfather's dented percolator, and spent the daylight hours fixing what needed fixing. He started small porch steps that sagged, roof shingles that had blown loose, windows that wouldn't open. Each repair revealed another, the way old houses do. But the work felt good. Clean. Every nail he drove, every board he replaced, was a choice he made for himself. In the barn he found his grandfather's toolbox, a heavy oak chest filled with hand tools from the 50s. The handles were worn smooth from decades of use, the steel still sharp. Burl ran his thumb along a chisel edge and felt the connection across time. These tools had built and fixed and created. Now they were his to carry forward. Copper adapted to country life like he'd been waiting for it his whole existence. He roamed the property each morning, checking fence lines, and chasing rabbits he'd never catch. The dog seemed younger somehow, more alive. Maybe that's what freedom did, gave you permission to be yourself again. By the end of the week, Burl needed supplies. The list was long: lumber, nails, paint, caulk, a dozen other things. He drove into Riverton on a Thursday morning, the little town quiet under a high blue sky. The hardware store sat on Main Street, its wooden facade painted forest green. A bell chimed as Burl pushed through the door. Inside, the place smelled of sawdust and machine oil, and something indefinable that all hardware stores share. A man in his 70s stood behind the counter, reading glasses perched on his nose, working through an invoice. "Help you find something?" he asked, looking up. "Need quite a bit, actually." Bell pulled out his list. Fixing up the old Nanton place. The man's eyebrows rose. Ezekiel's place? You family? Grandson. Burl Nanton. The man came around the counter, hand extended. Floyd Hutchins. Your grandfather was good people. Real good people. His grip was firm, calloused. Haven't seen anyone out there in years. Wondered if the place was still standing. Barely. But it'll get there. Floyd spent the next hour helping Burl gather supplies, offering advice on everything from wood treatment to pump maintenance. Well's probably fine, he said, loading 2x4s into a cart. Those old deep wells last forever. But check the pressure tank. Bladder might be shot after all this time. They talked as they worked, Floyd sharing memories of Ezekiel, how he'd hired Floyd as a teenager when his family was struggling, how he'd been at Floyd's wedding, his father's funeral, every important moment. Never asked for anything back, Floyd said quietly. Just helped, because that's who he was. At the register, Burl watched the total climb, $300, $400, $500. Floyd ran it up without comment, though his eyes lingered on the cash Burl pulled from his wallet. Not many people paid cash for that much anymore. You staying out there alone? Floyd asked as he counted change. Just me and my dog. Well, you need anything, you let me know. Be good to have someone in that house again. Your grandfather would be pleased. Burl drove to the diner next, suddenly hungry. The place was classic small-town red vinyl booths, checkered floor, a counter with swivel stools. A waitress in her 50s moved between tables with the easy efficiency of someone who'd been doing this work for decades. Her name tag said Corinne. Sit anywhere, hun, she called, balancing 3 plates. Burl took a booth by the window. Corinne appeared a moment later with coffee and a menu, her smile genuine. Just passing through, or staying a while. Staying, fixing up my grandfather's place outside town. Which grandfather? Ezekiel Nanton. Her face lit up. Oh, Ezekiel. He used to come in every Saturday for breakfast. Ordered the same thing for 30 years. 2 eggs. Over easy. Wheat toast. Bacon crisp. Tipped like a millionaire, even though everyone knew he lived simple. She studied Burl with open curiosity. You have his eyes. Kind eyes. Something in Burl's chest loosened at that. When was the last time someone had called him kind? He ordered the breakfast special and ate slowly, watching Riverton through the window. People moved at a different pace here. They stopped to talk on the sidewalk. Waved to passing cars. A man helped an elderly woman with her groceries. It was the kind of place that didn't exist anymore. Except, it did. It had been here all along, waiting. Back at the farmstead, Burl unloaded supplies and got to work. He replaced rotted porch boards, patched the hole in the bedroom ceiling, caulked windows. The physical labor felt good. Each evening his muscles ached in that honest way that comes from useful work, and he slept better than he had in years. He didn't turn his phone back on, didn't check email, let the silence stretch out until it felt natural, necessary even. Whatever his children wanted could wait. They'd made their choices. Now he'd make his. On the 8th day, Burl found something in his grandfather's desk, a leather-bound ledger from the 1,932nd, pages yellowed but intact. Inside were meticulous records, names, dates, amounts, money lent during the Depression to families in Riverton, hundreds of entries spanning years. But here was the thing. Next to each loan amount was a payment record, and the payments never matched the original amounts. Sometimes they were half, sometimes a quarter, sometimes just 2 dozen eggs and a thank you. In the margin of each entry, his grandfather had written, paid in full, in his careful hand. Burl traced the entries with his finger. Hutchins, $200, 1,932. Paid in full $50 in summer labor. Pritchard, $150, 1,934. Paid in full what they could spare. Comedy, $300, 1,936. Paid in full there, gratitude. His grandfather had given without expecting return, had helped people get back on their feet, then forgiven the debt. Over and over, year after year, a pattern of generosity that asked nothing back. Burl sat back in the desk chair, ledger open on his lap. He had $200 million, gathering interest in accounts he never touched. Money he'd earned through his own work, but never needed. What was it for, if not this? If not continuing what his grandfather had started? The idea took shape slowly. Anonymous help for people who deserved it. Quiet generosity without expectation or recognition. Not charity, his grandfather would have hated that word. Just neighborly. Just human. He'd have to be careful. Research who needed help and why. Make sure they were genuine, hard-working people facing genuine hardship. His grandfather hadn't helped everyone, Burl realized. Only those who would use the help wisely, who'd work hard, who'd pay it forward when they could. Burl pulled out a notebook, started making notes. The hardware store Floyd had mentioned his grandson needed surgery, something expensive the insurance wouldn't cover. The library, which he'd noticed, had a tarp on the roof. The young mother whose car had broken down in the grocery store parking lot, counting change for a tow truck. Not everyone, just those who deserved it, just like his grandfather had done. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky orange and pink. Copper barked at something in the sage. The house creaked around him, settling into evening. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Burl Nanton felt purposeful, useful, alive. The second week brought complications. Burl was replacing kitchen cabinet hinges when his phone rang the landline, a number he'd barely remembered existed. He stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Dad," Stuart's voice, tight with controlled anger. "We've been trying to reach you for 10 days. Have been busy. Busy. We thought you were dead. Or worse. What's worse than dead? Don't be cute. Where are you?" Burl looked out the kitchen window at the mountains. "Does it matter?" "Of course it matters. We had the police do a wellness check at Meadowbrook. You never showed up. They want to file a missing person report." "I'm not missing. I'm exactly where I want to be." A pause. Then Stuart's lawyer voice, the one that won cases. "Dad, you're not thinking clearly. You left with nothing, no plan, no support system. This is exactly why we were concerned about your judgment. My judgment is fine." "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you've abandoned your family, ignored your responsibilities, and disappeared to God knows where. That's not the behavior of someone who's thinking rationally." The words landed like punches, designed to wound, to make him doubt himself. Burl recognized the tactic. Stuart had used it on him for years, subtle undermining disguised as concern. "I need to go," Burl said. "We're selling the house. The papers are drawn up. We need your signature." "You're not getting it." "Dad." "I said no, Stuart. The house is mine. You can't sell it without me." "We'll see about that." The threat was clear. "We have options. Legal options. Do what you need to do." Burl hung up, hands shaking. He stood in the kitchen for a long moment, breathing slowly, willing his heart rate down. They weren't going to let this go. They'd push and push until they got what they wanted or proved they couldn't have it. He needed to protect himself. That afternoon, he drove 2 hours to Pendleton, the nearest city with proper legal services. Found an attorney named Jeffrey Sinclair who specialized in estate planning. The man was younger than Burl expected, maybe 45, but his office was lined with law books and his handshake was confident. "Tell me what's going on," Sinclair said, settling behind his desk. Burl told him. "Not everything, not about the money. Not yet, but about the eviction. The house. His children's threats." Sinclair listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. "They mentioned power of attorney?" Sinclair asked when Burl finished. "Yes. Do they have any documentation? Any prior agreement you signed?" No. Nothing. Good. That makes this simpler. Sinclair leaned back in his chair. First, we file a formal statement that you're competent and acting of your own free will. Second, we put protections on your property. The house can't be sold without your explicit, notarized signature. Third, we update your will to reflect your current wishes. Can they still challenge it? They can try. They'd need to prove incompetence, which requires medical evidence. Have you seen a doctor recently? 3 months ago. Clean bill of health except for some arthritis. We'll get a current evaluation, physical and cognitive, document that you're sharp as a tack and making informed decisions. That'll shut down any incompetency claim before it starts. Burl nodded slowly. What will this cost? Few $1,000s for the whole package. We can work out a payment plan if needed. That's fine. I'll pay in full. Burl pulled out his checkbook, not the one tied to his small checking account, but one connected to a trust account. He wrote a check for $5,000. Sinclair's eyes widened slightly at the amount, but he was professional enough not to comment. I'll start the paperwork today. Should have preliminary documents by end of week. Driving back to Riverton, Burl felt lighter. He was taking control, protecting himself. His children thought he was helpless. They were wrong. At the diner that evening, Corinne refilled his coffee and lingered by the table. The dinner rush was over, just a few regulars nursing pie and conversation. You look like you've got the weight of the world on you, she observed. Burl smiled despite himself. That obvious? I've been reading people across this counter for 30 years. You've got the look. She slid into the opposite booth. Want to talk about it? There was something about her directness, her lack of pretense, that made Burl want to trust her. Family troubles, he said carefully. The hardest kind. Your family close? 2 sons. Both moved to Seattle for work. See them maybe twice a year. She shrugged. I used to take it personally. Thought I'd done something wrong, driven them away. Then I realized I raised them to be independent. Can't resent them for being what I taught them to be. But there's independent and there's abandonment. True enough. She studied him. Which one are you dealing with? The second one. Corinne nodded slowly. I'm sorry. That's a hard thing. She stood, picked up the coffee pot. For what it's worth, you seem like you're doing all right. Better than when you first came in anyway. Had this lost look then. Don't have it now. After she walked away, Burl sat with her words. She was right. He did feel less lost. The work, the purpose, the simple rhythm of days. It was healing something he hadn't known was broken. Back at the farmstead, he found an email waiting from Jeffrey Sinclair. Quick work. The attorney had run background checks on his children's standard procedure in family disputes, apparently. What Burl read made his stomach turn. Stewart was facing a disciplinary hearing with the state bar. Client funds had gone missing from his trust account, nearly $200,000. The investigation was ongoing, but the evidence looked damning. Margot's real estate business was underwater. She'd made risky investments, borrowed against future commissions, and now owed more than $300,000 to various creditors. Foreclosure notices were pending. Garrett was under investigation by the SEC for running what amounted to a Ponzi scheme with elderly investors. He'd promised guaranteed returns, used new money to pay old investors, and pocketed the difference. If charged, he could face prison time. All 3 of them were in serious financial trouble. All 3 of them needed money desperately, and suddenly their concern for their aging father made perfect sense. They'd thrown him out thinking they could quickly liquidate his house, split the proceeds, and solve their problems. They'd seen him as a solution, not a person, a resource to be exploited, not a father to be loved. Burl closed his laptop and walked outside. The night was cold and clear, stars brilliant overhead. Copper followed him to the porch, settled at his feet. The dog's warmth was comforting, uncomplicated. Dogs didn't betray you, didn't pretend to care while plotting how to use you. Part of him wanted to help his children. The father in him that had bandaged scraped knees and paid for college and shown up to every graduation. That part wanted to write a check, solve their problems, be the hero again. But he knew better now. Helping them would teach nothing. They'd made their choices, bad ones, and now they needed to face the consequences. If he rescued them now, they'd never learn, never grow, never become the people he'd hoped they'd be. His phone buzzed. A text from Margot. "Dad, please. We need to talk. It's important." Pearl turned off the phone, put it in a drawer, sat back down with his grandfather's journal and read by lamplight until sleep finally came. 3 weeks into his new life, Pearl stood in the Riverton Historical Society, a converted house on a quiet side street. Nadine Pritchard, 75 and sharp as new glass, guided him through leather-bound volumes of town records. "Your grandfather was legendary around here," she said, pulling down a book from 1935. "During the drought, when half the farms were failing, he organized a water-sharing cooperative, convinced people to help each other instead of hoarding what they had." She opened the book to a photograph. 24 men standing in front of a newly dug irrigation channel, tools in hand, faces withered but smiling. Ezekiel stood in the middle, not at the front like a leader but among them like an equal. "He never wanted recognition," Nadine continued. "Town council tried to name a street after him in 1960. He told them to save their money and fix the school roof instead." She smiled at the memory. "So they fixed the roof." Pearl spent the morning reading through records, letters of gratitude from families his grandfather had helped, town council minutes, noting his quiet contributions. A pattern emerged. Ezekiel had been the heart of this community for 50 years, helping not through grand gestures, but through steady, consistent care. "We could use someone like him now," Nadine said as Pearl prepared to leave. "Town's struggling. Budget cuts, young people leaving, services disappearing. School needs computers but there's no money. Clinic needs equipment. Community center roof is about to collapse." She sighed. "We make do, but it gets harder every year." Driving home, Pearl's mind worked. $200 million. He could solve every problem Nadine mentioned with a fraction of that. But how? Anonymous donations would raise questions in a town this small. Everyone would want to know the source, the motivation, the expectation of return. He'd have to be careful. Strategic. Just like his grandfather had been. That afternoon, unexpected company arrived. Jeffrey Sinclair's silver Lexus looked out of place on the dirt road, dust coating its pristine paint. The attorney climbed out, briefcase in hand, looking around with undisguised interest. "Wanted to see this place?" he said. "And we need to talk in person." They sat on the porch, copper sprawled between them. Sinclair pulled out files, his expression serious. "Your children have filed for emergency conservatorship. They're claiming you're mentally incompetent and living in dangerous conditions." Hearing set for 6 weeks out, Pearl had expected this, but hearing it still stung. "On what grounds?" "They've got statements from 3 doctors saying you refused treatment recommendations. A psychiatrist who never met you, but reviewed your case and found concerning patterns. And photographs of this property taken yesterday, probably hired someone to drive by and document the condition. It's being renovated. I know that, you know that. But these photos make it look abandoned, dangerous. They're building a narrative. Elderly man with health issues, living in squalor, refusing help, disconnected from reality. That's not true. Doesn't matter. They just need to create doubt." Sinclair opened another file. "Here's what we do. First, full medical evaluation, physical and psychiatric. We document that you're healthy, competent, making informed decisions. Second, character witnesses from Riverton. People who can testify to your stability and contribution to the community. Third," he paused, "this is where it gets interesting. I could reveal your financial situation to the court." Pearl stiffened. "Why?" because it destroys their narrative. They're claiming you're a helpless old man who can't care for himself, but you're actually a sophisticated investor with substantial wealth, making rational decisions about your property and future. It would end the case immediately. It would also end my privacy. True, but consider the alternative. If they win conservatorship, they get control of everything. The house, your accounts, they don't know about the accounts. They will once discovery starts. Court proceedings require full financial disclosure. Your secret comes out either way. Question is whether you control the narrative, or they do. Burl watched Copper chase a butterfly through the sage. The dog was happy here, free. Revealing the money would change everything. Bring attention, questions, complications. People would treat him differently. His children would. His children, they'd be shocked, furious, desperate. They'd realize what they'd thrown away, what they could have had if they just loved him instead of using him. Let me think about it, Burl said finally. After Sinclair left, Burl walked his property. 40 acres of possibility. He'd made real progress these past weeks. The house was taking shape, the barn stabilized, the grounds cleared. He'd done this himself, with his own hands, proving something to no one but himself. But his children were forcing his hand, making him choose between privacy and protection. That evening at the diner, Corinne noticed his mood immediately. She brought coffee and slid into the booth without asking. Heavy thoughts again, she said. Not a question. My children are trying to have me declared incompetent. Her eyes widened. Can they do that? They're trying. Got a court hearing in 6 weeks. That's... She stopped herself, choosing words carefully. That's cruel. It's desperate. They need money for their own problems. Thought they could liquidate my assets, solve everything. But you're clearly fine, better than fine. You've done more work on that property in 3 weeks than most men half your age could do. Courts don't always see clearly. Sometimes they see what they want to see. Corinne was quiet a moment, then reached across the table and took his hand. The gesture surprised them both, but she didn't pull away. You're not alone in this. People here see who you are. We'd testify to that. You barely know me. I know enough. You're Ezekiel's grandson. You work hard, keep to yourself, treat people with respect. You tip well, and say please and thank you. She squeezed his hand. That tells me plenty. Walking back to his truck later, Burl felt something he hadn't expected. Gratitude. This woman who barely knew him was offering to stand beside him in court, defend him to strangers. Risk her time and reputation for someone who'd wandered into town 3 weeks ago. That's what his grandfather had built here. Not just a legacy of help, given, but a culture of people helping each other. And somehow, Burl was being welcomed into it. At home, he sat with his grandfather's journal and added his own entry below the last one Ezekiel had written. Day 22. My children are trying to take my freedom because they need my money. But I've found something here they'll never understand: community, built on character, not cash. Tomorrow I'll decide whether to reveal my wealth in court. Part of me wants to see their faces when they learn the truth. Part of me wants to keep the secret, prove I don't need their validation or their greed. Grandfather, what would you do? He stared at the words, waiting for wisdom that didn't come. Outside, an owl called across the darkness. Copper stirred in his sleep, chasing dream rabbits. The house settled around him with the patient creaks of old wood. Finally, Burl picked up his phone and called Sinclair. I've decided, he said when the attorney answered. We'll reveal the money, but on my terms, at the right moment, where it'll do the most good. You're sure? I'm sure. My children forced this fight. Time to show them what they're really up against. Month 2 brought revelation. Burl met with his financial advisor, Calvin Hughes, in Pendleton, to review his full portfolio for the foundation paperwork Jeffrey Sinclair was preparing. They sat in Hughes's conference room, spreadsheets and account statements covering the table like a paper landscape. I need the complete picture, Pearl said. Everything. I haven't looked at the details in years. Hughes pulled up files on his laptop, scrolling through accounts. The primary trust from your 1,994 patent sale has grown to 187 million. Conservative investments, mostly index funds and municipal bonds, exactly as you specified. And the mobile patent? That's where it gets interesting. Hughes stopped scrolling, turned the laptop toward Burl. You filed a derivative patent in 1996 for mobile applications of your compression algorithm, correct? Yes. Sold it through the same intermediary for 12 million. Right. But here's what you may not remember. The technology became foundational to smartphone data compression. Every phone manufactured since 2007 uses some version of it. You've been collecting royalties. Pearl stared at the screen. The numbers didn't make sense. How much? The royalty account has accumulated $93 million over the past 18 years. You never accessed it, so it just grew. With the primary trust, your total liquid assets are approximately 280 million. The room tilted slightly. Burl gripped the edge of the table. 280 million, plus the Oregon property, which is probably worth 2 million if developed, though land values are tricky out there. And your Portland house, at 600,000, though I understand that's complicated right now. Burl sat back, processing. He'd been so careful not to touch the money, so focused on living simply, that he'd never bothered to check the full scope of what he'd earned. $80 million he didn't even know existed. Money that could do so much good if used wisely. I want to set up a foundation, Burl said, something that can operate now and continue after I'm gone. Anonymous board, careful vetting, focused on rural communities like Riverton. Hughes nodded approvingly. Smart. We can structure it as a private foundation with an independent board. You maintain control during your lifetime, but it operates according to bylaws that continue your vision afterward. We'll need good legal counsel. I have that covered. They spent 2 hours working through details, investment strategy to sustain the foundation long-term, grant-making criteria to ensure money went to deserving recipients, oversight mechanisms to prevent waste or corruption. By the end, Burl's head spun with information, but the path forward was clear. Driving back to Riverton, his phone rang. He'd started keeping it on again, prepared for whatever his children threw at him. The screen showed Margot's number. Against his better judgment, he answered, Dad. Her voice was small, strained. Please. I need to talk to you. I'm listening. Not on the phone. Can I come see you? Just me, not the others. Please. Something in her tone made him hesitate. Desperation, yes, but also something that sounded like genuine pain. Where are you? Portland. I can drive out tomorrow. Just tell me where. Burl gave her the address, hung up feeling uneasy. This was either a breakthrough or a trap. With his children, it was hard to tell anymore. That evening, he worked on the barn by lamplight, replacing boards that had rotted through. The physical work helped him think. Margot coming alone might mean she was breaking ranks, or it might mean she was the designated negotiator. Either way, tomorrow would be interesting. Copper barked suddenly, and Burl looked up to see headlights coming down the drive. Too early for Margot. He set down his tools as a pickup truck parked near the house. Floyd Hutchins climbed out, looking uncomfortable. Sorry to bother you so late, Floyd called. Saw your lights on. Everything all right? Floyd walked closer, hands shoved in his pockets. Need to ask you something, and I want you to be straight with me. Burl's stomach tightened. Okay. My grandson needed surgery. Specialized thing, insurance wouldn't cover it. $35,000 we didn't have. Floyd watched Burl's face carefully. 3 days after I mentioned it in the store, someone slipped an envelope through my mail slot. Exact amount, cash, with a note saying it was from someone who remembered kindness. Burl kept his expression neutral. That's generous. That's suspicious, because only a handful of people knew about Tyler's surgery. And you were one of them. Floyd pulled an envelope from his jacket. This showed up at the library. Yesterday. $50,000 for computers, anonymous donation. Then the clinic got a check for medical equipment. Then the Johnsons found their back taxes paid. Sounds like someone cares about this town. It's you, isn't it? The direct question hung in the cool night air. Burl could deny it, but Floyd deserved honesty. Does it matter who it is? Yes and no. I'm grateful, God knows I'm grateful. Tyler's surgery went perfect, he's recovering great. But I need to know who I owe. You don't owe anyone. That's the point. Floyd studied him for a long moment. You're doing what Ezekiel did. Helping quiet-like, not asking for anything back. My grandfather was a good man. So are you. Floyd held out the envelope. This is from the town. We took up a collection. Not much. Maybe $300. But we wanted to do something. For the work you're doing on the property. For being Ezekiel's grandson. For whatever you might be doing that you won't admit to. Burl took the envelope, touched. You didn't have to do this. Yeah, we did. Because that's how it works here. Someone helps. You help back however you can. Even if it's just saying, thank you, proper. After Floyd left, Burl sat on the porch with the envelope unopened. His anonymity was cracking. People were figuring it out. Soon, everyone would know. And the simple, quiet life he'd built here would get complicated. But maybe that was okay. Maybe trying to help completely anonymously was pride in another form. Maybe accepting gratitude was part of the gift. He opened the envelope. Inside were bills and coins and a note signed by what looked like half of Riverton. For a good man doing good work. Welcome home. Burl read it 3 times, throat tight. Welcome home. Such simple words, but they meant everything. His children had thrown him out. Strangers had welcomed him in, and that made all the difference. Inside, he added another entry to his grandfather's journal. The money's not secret anymore. At least not completely. People are figuring it out. Part of me worried this would ruin everything, but Floyd showed me tonight that gratitude isn't a burden, it's connection. These people don't want to owe me. They want to know me. Maybe that's what grandfather understood all along. Generosity isn't about staying hidden. It's about being part of something bigger than yourself. Sleep came easily that night, and for the first time in months, Burl dreamed of the future instead of the past. Margot arrived at 10 the next morning, driving a BMW that looked painfully out of place on the dirt road. She climbed out wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Burl watched from the porch, coffee in hand, copper alert beside him. Dad. She removed the sunglasses, and Burl saw she'd been crying. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup imperfect. This wasn't the polished real estate agent who'd helped throw him out. This was his daughter, genuinely struggling. Margot. Can we talk? Inside. He led her into the kitchen, poured her coffee she didn't drink. They sat across from each other at his grandfather's table, years of damage and distance between them. I need to tell you something, she said finally. Something the boys don't know I'm doing. I'm listening. We hired an attorney, Randolph Blackstone. He specializes in conservatorship cases. And she stopped, struggling. He's not a good man, Dad. I did research after we hired him. He's been sanctioned twice for exploiting elderly clients. He takes a percentage of whatever estates his clients get control of. Usually 30%. Burl kept his face neutral. Why are you telling me this? Because I didn't know at first. None of us did. We were desperate, and Stuart found him, and we just... Her voice cracked. We just wanted to solve our problems. But now I see what we're doing. What we've done. And I'm ashamed. Are you here to ask me to help with your debt? No. She looked up. eyes fierce despite the tears. I'm here to tell you we're wrong. The conservatorship is wrong. Throwing you out was wrong. All of it. Why the change of heart? Because I came here and saw this. She gestured around the renovated kitchen. You're not falling apart. You're rebuilding. And I realized we threw you away because we thought you were broken. But we're the ones who are broken, not you. Burl sipped his coffee, saying nothing. Let her talk. I'm going to lose everything, Margot continued. The business, my house, probably my license. I made bad choices, borrowed money I couldn't repay, bet on things that didn't pan out. That's on me, not you. I can't ask you to fix it. But Stuart and Garrett, they'd still take everything if they could. They're in deeper than I am. Stuart could go to jail if he can't make restitution. Garrett's looking at federal charges. They need money desperately, and they'll destroy you to get it if that's what it takes. And you won't? She met his eyes. I won't. I came to warn you. Blackstone's going to paint you as delusional, dangerous to yourself. He's good at it. He's done it before. And once they get conservatorship, he'll drain whatever you have while promising the boys it's all going to them. She stood. I'm dropping out, withdrawing from the petition. It won't stop them, but at least you'll know someone in your family still has a conscience. After she left, Burl sat with her words. One of his 3 children had found her way back to decency. Maybe there was hope for her yet. But Stuart and Garrett were too far gone, too desperate, and now he knew they'd hired a predator to help them. The fight was coming whether he wanted it or not. That afternoon, Jeffrey Sinclair called with news. Just got served with their legal filing. They're claiming you have dementia, paranoid delusions about your family, and are living in conditions that endanger your health. They've got 3 doctors, willing to testify. You need immediate intervention. Doctors who never examine me. Doesn't matter to Blackstone, he's building a narrative. Our counter-strategy needs to be airtight. Are you ready to reveal your finances? Burl thought about his grandfather's journal entry from 1978. The Slattery boy tried to cheat me in a land deal. Showed him I knew. Didn't punish him, but made it clear I wasn't a fool. Sometimes you had to show your cards to protect yourself. Yes, Burl said. We reveal everything, but I want to do it in court, on the record, where they can't hide from the truth. That'll be dramatic. Good. Let them see exactly what they threw away. 2 weeks before the hearing, Burl underwent his medical evaluation. Dr. Patricia Whitaker, a geriatric specialist from Pendleton, spent 4 hours putting him through tests. Physical examination, cognitive assessment, psychiatric evaluation, memory tests, reasoning exercises. At the end, she sat back and smiled. Mr. Nanton, I wish all my patients were in your condition. Your physical health has actually improved, blood pressure down, muscle tone up, stress markers decreased. Cognitively, you're scoring above average for your age group. No signs of dementia, depression, or impaired judgment. Whatever you're doing out here, keep doing it. So I'm competent? Exceptionally so. I'll testify to that if needed. The week before the hearing, Riverton rallied. Word had spread about the conservatorship attempt, and the town was outraged. Floyd organized a meeting at the community center, and 40 people showed up, offering to be character witnesses. Ezekiel's grandson is being attacked by his own children, Floyd told the crowd. They're claiming he can't take care of himself. Anyone here believe that? A chorus of no and ridiculous filled the room. Then we stand with him. We show that court who Burl Nanton really is. Nadine Pritchard stood. I'll testify about his historical research, his clear mind, his dedication to preserving his grandfather's legacy. Wendell Carmody. I'll speak to his character and integration into the community. Corinne. I'll talk about his daily routine, his clarity of purpose, his obvious competence. One by one, they volunteered. People Burl barely knew, standing up to defend him because of who his grandfather had been, and who they believed Burl to be. That evening, Corinne walked him back to his truck after the meeting. "You've got a whole town behind you," she said. "How does that feel?" "Overwhelming. Humbling. They're not doing it out of obligation. They're doing it because you matter. Because you've made a difference here in just 2 months. I've barely done anything. You've done more than you know. The donations, the work on your property, the way you treat people with respect and dignity, that matters in a small town." She paused at his truck. "You're going to win this fight. Not just because you're in the right, but because you've built something here they can't take away." The night before the hearing, Burl couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch with Copper, watching stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in Portland, his children were preparing their case, confident they'd win, planning how to split his assets once they had control. They had no idea what was coming. Burl pulled out his grandfather's journal one last time, added a final pre-court entry. "Tomorrow, I face my children in court. They think they're fighting for my money. They don't know about the money, the real money. I'm fighting for something different. The right to live as I choose, to give as I choose, to matter on my own terms. Whatever happens tomorrow, I've already won. I've found home." The morning of the hearing arrived cold and clear. Burl dressed carefully, clean flannel shirt, pressed jeans, his grandfather's gold pocket watch. The watch had an inscription, "To Ezekiel, for service above self, 1945. He wore it like armor. Jeffrey Sinclair picked him up at 7. They'd gone over testimony a dozen times, but the attorney reviewed it once more as they drove. "Blackstone will try to provoke you, make you seem irrational, emotional, unstable. Every answer needs to be calm, measured, clear. Don't engage with the emotion. Just state facts." "I understand. And you're sure about the financial disclosure? Once we reveal it, there's no taking it back." Burl touched the watch in his pocket. "I'm sure." The Morrow County Courthouse was a 100-year-old building in Pendleton, all stone and dignity. A dozen Riverton residents waited on the steps. Floyd, Nadine, Wendell, Corinne, others, whose names Burl was still learning. They'd driven an hour to be here, taken time off work, just to support him. "We've got your back," Floyd said simply. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than Burl expected. Wood paneling, high windows, an American flag behind the judge's bench. Stewart, Garrett, and their attorney Blackstone sat on one side. They looked expensive in their tailored suits, confident in their righteousness. Blackstone was exactly what Burl expected. Silver hair, expensive watch, the smile of a shark. He leaned towards Stewart, whispering, barely glancing at Burl as he entered. Judge Helena Rutherford took the bench. At 9 sharp, she was in her 60s, gray hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain. Her expression suggested she'd seen every kind of family dispute, and wasn't easily fooled. "This is a hearing on the petition for emergency conservatorship," she said. "Mr. Blackstone, as petitioner's counsel, you'll present your case first." Blackstone stood, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, this is a tragic case of a man who's lost his capacity to care for himself but refuses to acknowledge it. Burl Nanton was a good father, a hard-working man, but age and isolation have taken their toll. His children love him desperately. They're here today to save him from himself." He called Stewart first. Burl's oldest son took the stand. Sworn in, sat with his lawyer posture back straight, hands folded. "Tell the court about your father's decline," Blackstone prompted. "Over the past year, Dad became increasingly withdrawn, stopped maintaining the house, let repairs pile up. He talked obsessively about our grandfather's old farm, a place that hasn't been lived in for 15 years. When we tried to discuss sensible care options, he became hostile. What did you do? We researched facilities, found a good one with activities, medical staff on site. We thought if we presented it as decided, he'd accept it. And his reaction? He disappeared. Just left in the middle of the night with his dog." Nanton. When did you last visit your father before this alleged decline? Stuart hesitated. 6 months before. And before that? Maybe a year. So you noticed a dramatic change during a visit after not seeing him for a year? We talked on the phone. How? Often? Monthly. Sometimes. Sometimes meaning less than monthly. I was busy. Work. Family. Too busy to visit your aging father regularly, but suddenly very concerned about his welfare? Sinclair, let that hang. Mr. Nanton, are you currently facing a disciplinary hearing with the Oregon State Bar? Blackstone objected. Relevance, Your Honor. Goes to motivation, Sinclair countered. The court needs to understand why this petition was filed now. Judge Rutherford considered. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Mr. Nanton. Stuart's jaw tightened. Yes. For misappropriation of client funds? Alleged misappropriation. Nothing's been proven. But you're facing potential disbarment and restitution requirements of approximately $200,000. That's confidential. It's public record. Your father's house is worth $600,000. Convenient timing for this conservatorship petition, isn't it? That's not what this is about. Isn't it? Blackstone called Garrett next. The testimony followed a similar pattern: concern for Dad's welfare, worry about his isolation, his refusal to accept help. Under cross-examination, Sinclair revealed Garrett's SEC investigation, his desperate need for legal fees, his sudden interest in his father's assets. By lunch recess, the judge looked skeptical. Blackstone's case was crumbling under the weight of obvious self-interest. In the hallway, Stuart and Garrett huddled with their attorney. Burl watched them from across the corridor, seeing the moment they realized they were losing. Blackstone's gestures grew agitated. Stuart's face reddened. Garrett looked like he might be sick. Corinne appeared beside Burl, with coffee from the courthouse cafeteria. They're not doing well. No. You ready for your testimony? As ready as I'll ever be. She squeezed his arm. Truth's on your side. That matters. After lunch, Sinclair called his witnesses. Dr. Whitaker testified about Burl's excellent health, his cognitive clarity, his improvement since moving to the farmstead. Floyd spoke about the property renovation, the quality of work, the clear thinking behind it. Nadine described Burl's historical research, his sharp mind, his purposeful living. Corinne's testimony was simple but powerful. I see Burl Nanton every few days at my diner. He's clear-eyed, thoughtful, engaged. He's rebuilding a life after his children threw him away. That's not incapacity. That's courage. Blackstone tried to shake them on cross-examination but got nowhere. These were credible people with first-hand knowledge, and their testimony was damning to his case. Finally, Sinclair called Burl. The walk to the witness stand felt long. Burl placed his hand on the Bible, took the oath, sat down. From the witness chair he could see everyone, his sons staring at him with barely concealed desperation, the Riverton contingent watching with support, the judge studying him with sharp intelligence. Mr. Nanton Sinclair began gently. Please tell the court why you left Portland. Burl took a breath. My children held a family meeting. They told me I was too much trouble, too expensive to maintain. They'd found a care facility and were selling my house to pay for it. When I objected, they packed my belongings in garbage bags and changed the locks while I stood on the porch. He kept his voice level. They didn't ask what I wanted. They decided for me. So I left. Where did you go? To my grandfather's farmstead in eastern Oregon. He left it to me 15 years ago. I've forgotten how much I loved it there. Describe the property's condition when you arrived. Burl detailed the disrepair, the work he'd done, the progress he'd made. Sinclair introduced photographs before and after shots that told a story of dedication and capability. You did this work yourself at 60 years old? Most of it. Some help with roofing from neighbors. The medical testimony came next. The psychological evaluation. The psychological testimony. Character witnesses' statements. every piece of evidence pointing to one conclusion. Burl Nanton was not just competent, he was thriving. Then Blackstone stood for cross-examination, and Burl knew the real battle was beginning. Blackstone approached the witness stand with the confidence of a man who'd done this 100 times. Mr. Nanton, you lived in a comfortable modern home in Portland. Why would any rational person choose isolation over family? I didn't choose isolation. I chose peace. Peace from your children who love you. Love isn't throwing someone out with garbage bags. Blackstone's smile tightened. Your children were concerned about your welfare. That's not abandonment, that's care. Care would have been asking what I wanted. They decided for me. Because your judgment was impaired, you were neglecting yourself, letting your home deteriorate. I had arthritis. Some repairs were difficult. That doesn't mean I was incompetent. Blackstone shifted tactics. Mr. Nanton, how do you support yourself at this farmstead? What income do you have? Here it was, the moment everything changed. I have savings, Burl said carefully. Investments. From what source? You're retired, living on a modest pension. How can you afford property maintenance, living expenses, and still refuse your children's help? I sold a patent years ago. The money's been invested. Blackstone's tone became dismissive. A patent from 30 years ago? How much could that possibly provide at this point? Burl looked at Sinclair, who nodded slightly. Quite a bit, actually. Sinclair stood. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Defense Exhibit 12, complete financial disclosure of Burl Nanton's assets. He distributed folders to the judge, opposing counsel, and the gallery. Burl watched Blackstone open his copy, saw the exact moment comprehension hit. The attorney's face drained of color. Stewart grabbed his copy, eyes scanning. His mouth fell open. Garrett leaned over, reading, then went rigid with shock. Judge Rutherford studied the documents, eyebrows rising. Mr. Sinclair, these figures are accurate, Your Honor, verified by Mr. Nanton's financial advisor, Calvin Hughes, whose affidavit is attached. The judge read aloud, a voice carrying through the silent courtroom. Total net worth, $280 million. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The Riverton contingent exchanged stunned glances. Floyd's jaw dropped. Even Corinne, who'd suspected something, looked shocked. Stewart stood involuntarily. That can't be. Sit down, Mr. Nanton, the judge ordered sharply. Garrett stared at the paper, face pale. Margot, who'd been sitting in the back despite withdrawing from the petition, covered her mouth with both hands. Blackstone recovered first, though his hands shook slightly. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We had no indication. You didn't ask, Sinclair interrupted. You assumed my client was destitute. You built your entire case on a false premise. Judge Rutherford held up a hand. Mr. Sinclair, please explain this to the court. Sinclair approached the bench. In 1994, Burl Nanton created a revolutionary data compression algorithm. He sold the patent through an intermediary for $8 million. Invested conservatively, and never touched the principal. In 1996, he filed a derivative patent for mobile applications. That technology became industry standard in smartphones. He's been collecting royalties for 25 years. And he never told his children? The judge asked. No, Your Honor. Mr. Nanton believed in teaching his children to value work and character over wealth. He planned to tell them eventually, when they were mature enough to handle it responsibly. Sinclair paused. Events suggest that moment never arrived. Blackstone tried to regroup. Your Honor, regardless of finances, the question of competency remains. Does it? The judge's tone was icy. Your entire argument was that Mr. Nanton couldn't care for himself financially. These documents prove otherwise. They prove he's been managing a substantial fortune wisely for 3 decades. But the living conditions show a man renovating a property he inherited. I've seen the photographs, Mr. Blackstone. That's not squalor, that's construction. Sinclair continued. Your Honor, may I resume direct examination? Please do. Sinclair turned back to Bell. Mr. Nanton, why didn't you tell your children about this wealth? Bell chose his words carefully. I wanted them to build their own lives, earn their own success. I saw what inherited wealth did to some families. Children who never worked, never struggled, never learned the value of anything. I didn't want that for mine. When did you plan to tell them? When they showed they understood what really matters. Character, integrity, treating people with dignity. He looked at his sons. I'm still waiting. Stuart's face was red, Garrett's white. The contrast would have been funny under different circumstances. What are your plans for this wealth now? I'm establishing a charitable foundation, following my grandfather's example of quiet generosity, helping rural communities, supporting people who help themselves, making a real difference where it's needed most. And your children? Well, met their eyes across the courtroom. They're adults. They made choices that brought them to financial trouble. Those are consequences they need to face. I won't enable them anymore. No further questions. Blackstone approached for cross-examination, but the fight had gone out of him. He asked a few half-hearted questions about investment strategy, trying to establish something, anything, that might suggest impaired judgment. But every answer Burl gave demonstrated financial sophistication far beyond what most people possessed. Finally, Blackstone gave up. No further questions. The judge called a 15-minute recess. In the hallway, chaos erupted. Stuart cornered Blackstone. You said this would work. You said he was incompetent. You said he was broke. Blackstone shot back. You gave me false information. We didn't know. That's your problem, not mine, and I'll still expect my fee. Your fee? We're not paying you anything. You lost. Their alliance crumbled before Burl's eyes, attorney and clients turning on each other like sharks. Garrett stood against the wall, staring at nothing. The reality of what they'd thrown away was hitting him. $280 million. Their father had been sitting on a fortune while they scrambled for money, made bad choices, committed crimes to stay afloat. And they'd never known. Margot approached Bell, tears streaming. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I know, Bell said quietly. You weren't meant to. Not until you were ready. Will I ever be ready? I don't know, sweetheart. That's up to you. Floyd appeared at Burl's elbow, grinning. 280 million? And you let me pay you in lumber scraps? The lumber was payment enough, like hell it was. But Floyd was laughing, delighted. You really are Ezekiel's grandson. Corinne stood nearby, shaking her head in amazement. All those times you came into the diner, ordered the special, tipped modestly. I liked the special. And modest tips fit who I am. Who you are, she repeated softly, is pretty remarkable. The bailiff called them back. Judge Rutherford had reached her decision. The courtroom fell silent as she spoke. I've reviewed all evidence presented today. Medical testimony shows Burl Nanton is in excellent health, with no cognitive impairment. Financial records show sophisticated money management over decades. Character witnesses describe a competent, engaged, contributing member of his community. The photographs show purposeful property renovation, not neglect. She looked at Stuart and Garrett, her expression stern. This petition appears motivated by financial desperation rather than genuine concern. I find no basis whatsoever for conservatorship. Her gavel fell. Petition denied. The gavel's sound echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the Riverton contingent erupted in quiet cheers, respectful of the setting but unable to contain their joy. Judge Rutherford wasn't finished. She removed her glasses, fixed Stuart and Garrett with a look that could freeze water. Furthermore, I'm deeply troubled by what I've observed today. This petition was not filed in good faith. The evidence suggests financial exploitation disguised as concern. Stuart half rose from his chair. Your Honor, we were trying to help. Sit down. The command was absolute. Stuart sat. You threw your father out of his home with garbage bags. You hired an attorney known for exploiting conservatorship proceedings. You built a case on assumptions and lies. She paused, letting the words sink in. I'm referring this matter to the Oregon State Bar for investigation into Mr. Blackstone's conduct. As for you two, you should be ashamed. Blackstone stood quickly. Your Honor, I object to any characterization of my... Your objection is noted and overruled. You've made a career of these cases, Mr. Blackstone. 16 conservatorships in 5 years, all involving substantial estates, all resulting in sizable fees for you. This court has had enough. Bailiff, please provide Mr. Blackstone with the bar referral paperwork. The attorney's face went from red to purple. He gathered his papers with shaking hands, shooting venomous looks at Stuart and Garrett. The sharks were eating each other now, and Burl watched without pity. This court is adjourned. The gavel fell again, final and absolute. In the hallway, Floyd clapped Burl on the shoulder. That judge tore them apart. She saw the truth, Burl said simply. Nadine hugged him. Your grandfather would be so proud. Standing up for yourself, helping the community. Living with integrity. That's exactly what he did. Wendell shook his hand. Drinks are on me at the diner. Well, coffee. We're not fancy folks. Coffee sounds perfect. As the Riverton group celebrated, Burl noticed Stuart and Garrett standing near the courtroom doors. They looked lost, defeated, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Margot stood apart from them, watching her brothers with something like pity. Stuart finally approached, Garrett trailing behind. They stalked a few feet away, and for a long moment nobody spoke. Dad, Stuart began, then stopped. What could he say? I'm sorry we threw you out. I'm sorry we tried to steal your independence. I'm sorry we didn't know you were rich. I hope you learned something from this, Burl said quietly. Both of you. We didn't know, Garrett said, his voice small. About the money. You thought I was poor and helpless, and that made it okay to control me. Burl shook his head. The money doesn't matter. You would have done the same thing if I'd had nothing. That's what I can't forgive. We made mistakes, Stuart said, lawyer voice gone. Just a son now. Bad ones. Yes, you did. And now you face the consequences. I hope they teach you what I couldn't. What happens now? Garrett asked. You figure out your own problems, pay your debts, face your charges, rebuild your lives. Without my help. Stuart's jaw clenched. That's it? You're just cutting us off? You cut me off first. You threw me away when you thought I had nothing to offer. Now you know I have everything, and you want back in. Burl's voice was steady, sad but certain. That's not how love works. That's not how family works. We're still your sons, Garrett said desperately. Then act like it. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday when you've learned who you need to be. Until then, we're done here. He turned away, toward the Riverton group waiting by the elevators. Floyd had his arm around Nadine. Corinne caught Burl's eye and smiled. These people, practical strangers 2 months ago, had stood beside him when his own blood had tried to destroy him. Stuart called after him. Dad. Wait. Burl stopped, looked back. What? Stuart struggled, pride and desperation warring on his face. Finally. I'm sorry, for what we did, for who we became. You deserved better. It wasn't much. It wasn't enough. But it was something. The first crack in the armor of entitlement that had protected Stuart for years. Thank you for saying that, Burl said. It's a start. Outside the courthouse, September's sun warmed the steps. The Riverton group lingered, unwilling to let the moment end. They'd come to support one of their own, and they'd witnessed something extraordinary, a man standing up to his children and winning not through anger, but through truth. Margot appeared beside Burl as the others talked. Can I say something? Of course. I'm glad you won. Really glad. She wiped her eyes. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I'm going to fix my life. The right way. No shortcuts, no bailouts. I'm declaring bankruptcy, starting over, rebuilding from nothing. That takes courage. You would know. You did the same thing. She smiled through tears. Maybe I'm more your daughter than I thought. Maybe you are. She hugged him then, fierce and quick, and walked away before he could respond. Pearl watched her go, feeling the smallest stirring of hope. One of his 3 children had found her way back to decency. Perhaps in time, the others would too, but that wasn't his responsibility anymore. At the diner in Riverton, the celebration continued. Corinne brought out pineapple, made fresh that morning, and coffee flowed freely. Floyd proposed a toast to Beryl Nanton for showing us that doing the right thing still matters, for proving that family isn't just blood, it's the people who stand beside you when everything falls apart. Glasses clinked. Beryl felt warmth spread through his chest, not from the coffee but from belonging. Real belonging, earned through character rather than obligation. Speech, someone called. Beryl stood reluctantly. I'm not good at speeches, but I want to say thank you. 2 months ago, I came here with nothing but garbage bags and a dog. You welcomed me, helped me, stood beside me today when my own children wouldn't. That means more than money ever could. To community, Floyd called, and the response echoed. To community. Driving home as the sun set, Copper beside him in the farmstead waiting, Beryl felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just peace, though there was that. Not just purpose, though he had that too. Contentment. The bone-deep satisfaction of living according to his values, helping people who deserved it, building something that mattered. His children had tried to take everything from him. Instead, they'd set him free to find what he'd been missing. All along, the farmstead appeared through the dusk, lights on in the windows he'd repaired, smoke rising from the chimney he'd cleaned. Home. Not the house he'd lost, but the one he'd chosen. The one he'd earned. Beryl parked the truck, let Copper out to explore, and stood for a moment taking it all in. The mountains, the sage, the endless sky. Tomorrow he'd continue the work on the property, on the foundation, on building a life worth living. But tonight, he'd simply be grateful. 3 months after the hearing, Beryl stood in the offices of the newly established Ezekiel Nanton Community Foundation. The space was modest, a renovated storefront on Riverton's main street, but it was real. Jeffrey Sinclair had finalized the paperwork. The board was assembled. The mission was clear. Support rural communities through quiet, strategic generosity. The first grants had already gone out. The clinic received new medical equipment. The school got its computer lab. The community center had a timeless new roof. A dozen families facing hardship had received anonymous help, always carefully vetted, always deserving, always given without expectation of return. Floyd served on the board, along with Nadine, Wendell, and 3 others from neighboring towns. They met monthly to review applications, discuss strategy, and ensure the money did the most good. Beryl attended but didn't dominate. This was about legacy, not control. Your grandfather would burst with pride, Floyd said, reviewing the latest grant proposals. This is exactly what he did, just bigger. He showed me the way. I'm just following the path. The farmstead was finished now. Every room restored, every repair complete. Beryl had added a workshop in the barn, where he built furniture to donate to families in need. The physical work still felt good, kept him grounded, reminded him that wealth without purpose was empty. Copper had slowed down some, his muzzle grayer, but he still patrolled the property each morning, like he owned it. Which, in a way, he did. The dog had found his home here, same as Beryl. On a cold November evening, Beryl sat on his porch with Corinne. They'd fallen into a comfortable routine dinner at the diner twice a week, coffee at the farmstead on Sundays, easy companionship that asked nothing and gave everything. Got a letter today, Corinne said, pulling an envelope from her jacket. From my oldest son. He's coming for Thanksgiving. First time in 3 years. That's wonderful. He said something in the letter. Said he'd been taking his family for granted, focused on work and success, and forgot what mattered. Said he realized it after hearing about what your children did to you. She looked at Beryl. You made him think about his own priorities. I didn't do anything. You lived with integrity even when it cost you. That's a powerful example. She squeezed his hand. You changed more than this town, Beryl. You changed how people think about family, about what really matters. A week before Thanksgiving, Beryl received an email. The sender was Stuart. The subject line read simply, Progress. Dad, I don't expect you to read this, but I need to write it anyway. The bar hearing is next month. I'll probably lose my license, at least temporarily. I've made restitution to the clients I hurt, borrowed from friends, sold my house, downsized everything. Amanda left. Can't blame her. This is all on me. But something strange happened. Once I stopped trying to maintain the appearance of success, once I accepted the consequences and started making it right, I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying weight I didn't need. You tried to teach us this. I didn't listen. I'm listening now. I'm rebuilding, the right way this time. Not asking for help, just wanted you to know. Your son, Stuart. Beryl read it twice. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was accountability, growth, the first real sign that Stuart might become the man he was meant to be. He wrote back, I'm proud of you for facing your consequences. That takes courage. The path forward won't be easy, but it will be honest. That matters more than you know. When you're ready, there's always room at my table. Dad. Thanksgiving morning dawned clear and cold. Beryl spent it quietly, fixing a turkey in his grandfather's kitchen, copper underfoot, hoping for scraps. He'd invited the Riverton group for dinner, Floyd and his wife, Nadine, Wendell, Corinne, a dozen others who'd become family in the truest sense. As he worked, Beryl thought about the journey. 6 months ago, he'd stood on a porch in Portland with garbage bags, broken and betrayed. Now, he stood in a kitchen he'd restored, surrounded by purpose and community and genuine belonging. His children had thrown him away thinking he was worthless. They'd learned he was wealthy. But that wasn't the real lesson. The real lesson was simpler, deeper. Worth isn't measured in dollars but in how you treat people, especially when there's nothing to gain. The guests arrived at 2, bringing side dishes and gratitude. They filled the house with warmth and laughter. Floyd said grace, thanking God for second chances and new beginnings and community that endures. During dinner, Nadine proposed a toast to Beryl Nanton for reminding us what generosity looks like, for honoring his grandfather's legacy, for choosing us. To Beryl, the table chorused. Beryl stood, glass raised. To all of you, for teaching me that family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up when everything falls apart. You showed up for me. I'll never forget that. Later, as dishes were cleared and coffee poured, Corinne found Beryl on the porch. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Happy? She asked. Very. Any regrets? Beryl thought about his children. Stuart was trying. Margot had found her way back to decency. Garrett was still lost, but maybe someday he'd find himself too. They'd hurt him deeply, but they'd also freed him. Without their betrayal, he'd never have come here, never have found this life. No regrets, he said finally. Everything happened exactly as it needed to. That night, alone with Copper and the journal, Beryl made his final entry. 6 months ago, my children threw me away. They thought I was worthless. They were wrong about the money, but that's not what matters. What matters is this. I built a life I'm proud of. I'm helping people the way grandfather did. I'm surrounded by genuine community. I'm living with purpose and peace. My children gave me the greatest gift. Though they didn't mean to, they gave me freedom to become who I was always meant to be. I forgive them, and I thank them, because this life, this beautiful, purposeful life, started the moment they closed that door. Sometimes losing everything is how you find what really matters. He closed the journal, set it on the shelf beside his grandfather's. 2 generations of wisdom, 2 men who'd learned that wealth means nothing without character, that family is chosen through action, that the richest life is one lived in service to others. Outside, stars blazed across the desert sky. Copper snored beside the fire. The house settled around him with familiar creaks, and Burl Nanton, 60 years old and finally home, smiled into the darkness and slept the sleep of the content.